And welcome to Let 'Em Talk. I'm Paul DiRienzo. Got a great show in store for you tonight. And my guest is Keith Patchel, who's a composer and a producer and a filmmaker and all about creative guy. And welcome to Let Them Talk. Glad to have you on.
Thank you so much. It's really a pleasure and a privilege to be here. And yeah, this is great. So shoot, anything you want to talk about?
All right, cool. Well, I love talking about music and and the creative process that leads to creation of music, and especially modern compositions like you work on. And we have a friend in common in Clayton Patterson who introduced us and suggested I have you on the show, and I was so happy to have you on now to talk about your experience and your work. And I don't know. Let's start at the beginning. I mean, first of all, I noticed you did some stuff with the American Museum of Natural History and the Hayden Planetarium.
Yes.
So, did you ever get to meet Neil deGrasse Tyson?
Yes.
What's he like in person?
He's an interesting guy. I mean, he's super sharp. I mean, that's for sure. I mean, he's a really, really smart man, and I think he's an incredible communicator. I work with his colleague, his partner, Dr. Carter Emmart, who's the director of the Hayden Planetarium. We have this really interesting project, this show that we're developing. It's called the MarsBand, where Carter is a world-renowned expert in astrovisualization and these enormous data sets. There's so much data that human beings can't possibly see it in a lifetime. There's just too much data. But he's culled through it, and we take this
like
amazing
space data about
real
the planets.
Scientific data. These are the mapping of Mars and the mapping of Pluto, which just took place, the Moon. They have these amazing, real data sets, like you're really sort of on there. And Carter flies through the canyons and the topography, and so we do this really interesting thing where he's sort of cruising through the planets, the galaxy, and then out into the universe.
How did you wind up in outer space?
Me?
Yes.
I love outer space. I'm one of these kids. I've just always loved science. I've always loved astronomy. And it turns out it's a really funny story. Carter's my neighbor. We live in the same building in the Lower East Side. And we just used to say, "Hey man, how you doing?" Like in the hall. I had no idea who he was, and then one day he was at this coffee bar and just getting a coffee, and hit his laptop, and I just kind of peeked over his shoulder and I looked at it and I go, "Oh my God, what's that?" He goes, "Oh, that's just the stuff I do at work." And I was like, "Work? That's kind of amazing. Like, what do you do?" And he said, "Well, I'm the director of the Hayden Planetarium." And I was like, "What?"
I see. And then, so you actually try and give a musical soundtrack to the data, the scientific data, in order to make it easier to understand.
It's yeah, exactly. It's a live show. It's interactive. We're pushing each other. Carter will fly through these really amazing. Imagine being in a little Cessna airplane cruising over the top of Mars, through the canyons and the valleys, and so I've composed a lot of music. There's segments that are sort of fully composed, and then there's sort of reductions that I play on top of, and then some of it's purely improvised. And we've been playing with some other musicians that we're checking out, and
and you've done the same with Pluto as well.
Yeah, well, last year it was about March 2015. We were just getting the MarsBand thing really off the ground, and Carter just came and said, "Keith, poor little Pluto doesn't have a symphony of its own." We were talking about Gustav Holst and the planets, and I said, "Gulp," because I knew what he meant.
That's interesting to me because, of course, we know that Neil deGrasse Tyson did a documentary in which he's outspoken that Pluto is, in fact, not a planet, but an icy body.
Right. Well, listen, that's a sort of a scientific hot potato right now. Some people are maintaining it's the beginning of the Kuiper Belt, which is the sort of the extension of our solar system, and and those other people say it clearly is a planet. I'm in the camp. I think it's a planet. For me, it's always going to be a planet.
So you added it you made it the ninth planet of the Planet Symphony, right?
Well, yeah. So I wrote this full 4-movement Pluto Symphony, which I recorded. I have a lot of experience as a film composer, so I rendered it as an audio file, and and Carter had it played at the planetarium during the presentation, which was a global networked event between planetariums, and because of that and some other things, it made me eligible. I was a nominee for last year's Pulitzer Prize in Music.
Congratulations,
Thank
my
you,
friend,
sir.
from the Lower East Side.
Yeah, from the Lower East Side to
good for you
to Columbia
Keith
and on. Yeah, so
all right, we have the Pluto Symphony. We're gonna watch a couple minutes of it, and folks can watch more of it themselves on the internet. But let's introduce you folks to Keith's work. So here we go. that was the mapping of Pluto done to the music of Keith Patchel, is here with us, the composer who created that work. And wow, what was happening there? What can you explain that to us?
Sure, I'd be glad to.
For a layman?
Yeah.
Layperson?
Yeah, what that was a real-time visualization of what the spacecraft, the New Horizons spacecraft, was actually doing. It had been sent from Earth about 9 years ago, flown out to Pluto. It had a very narrow window of time to open up all of its observational equipment, and then it was mapping. That green banding that you were seeing was the cameras actually taking like sets of stills to have the first topological map of Pluto, and as well as a lot of spectroscopy that was going on, looking at the ions in the atmosphere to see what the makeup is, the chemical makeup, and it was just stunning. And that actually took place in real time last summer at the planetarium, right as the craft was going by, because there's no cameras in outer space. So that's Carter. Thank you, Carter. I mean, it was his idea and his will that made that happen, and he
and that was where was that presented? That was actually shown
at the. It was in the IMAX theater inside the American Museum of Natural History.
At the time it was happening,
At the time it was happening.
So that was live. That was as it was happening.
Live as it was happening. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Or at least as live as the information was coming down, because isn't there hours and hours of time between? Pluto?
Well, that's the interesting thing. That was a simulation, which was actually as it was happening exactly in time. And now the data is still returning. The modems were so small and slow, and because I guess the way the radio telescopes work, that sort of pull the data back in little particles and bits. They're still pulling all of the data off of.
It would take actually several years to get all the data.
I guess it's going to take about 2 years. So I think they're getting closer to the end. But
that's a download. I remember.
That's a download.
Remember 300 baud modems?
Yeah.
What's my picture?
14. Coming? Yeah. 14K modems.
Right,
man,
that was the day.
Welcome to the 90s.
Well, that's amazing. And you did Mars as well, so you've done both. And tell us a little bit about yourself, Keith. How did you come to become a composer, and where did you begin your career? How did you begin it?
I've always loved music since I've been a kid. I started playing guitar, and I did a lot of. I was playing in bands and stuff, like in high school, and I sort of fell in love with like nylon string guitar, and I was playing a lot of classical guitar for a while. I was very fortunate in that I went to. I actually grew up in the suburbs between Buffalo and Niagara Falls, and I went to SUNY Buffalo. They had a classical guitar department and a teacher, which was, there were very few at the time. But the huge thing that happened was the creative associates were there. Morton Feldman, Lejarin Hiller, who was my first real teacher. They had a recording studio with the old huge, the Moog, 109B series, that big wooden thing where you had to plug in all of the stuff.
Right. The Moog synthesizer? It's
a
Moog or a Moog?
A Moog.
Moog, okay.
Yeah, we call it a Moog, yeah.
We're pronouncing that wrong all these years.
And as it's crazy as it turns out, Bob Moog was from Western New York. They built all of that original stuff, not far from where I grew up. So there was just an incredible confluence of people and artists who were there. I mean, I met John Cage and Xenakis and even Aaron Copland. He was very elderly at the time, but so there was these extraordinary concerts that I was able to see and just go because I just loved the music, and so it sort of piqued me to I want to learn how to compose as well, because I knew how to write songs but there was many deeper kind of levels and stuff, and there were just some great people there, and then I moved to New York, and I was and I could play guitar really well, so I wound up. And I wanted to, play rock music as well. So I was playing in CBGBs and Maxes and all of that stuff. And
by rock you mean classic rock or
kind of
punk rock or
new wave punk, kind of slightly,
At CB's was Sunday Show or
no. I sort of lucked out. I met Richard Lloyd, who had played in television, sort of a legendary, and they were one of my favorite bands. I'd heard the recordings, and I was like. And just through friends and circumstance, I met him, and he needed a guitarist, so I started to play with him, and it was kaboom.
So you're a filmmaker as well. In the sense of that you've composed for films and produced films.
Yeah,
But besides, we can tell you have a website that people can find out about as well.
Yeah, there's
more information. Let's tell people before we move forward. Maybe.
Yeah, it's KeithPatchel.com, which is my name, KeithPatchel. Patchel.com. There's all kinds of excerpts of my work, and if anyone does a Google search of my name, a lot of stuff will just pop up,
including the Pluto Symphony we just saw.
Yeah, and that's online. That's a YouTube link, and tons and tons of other stuff.
So the movies you were involved in, I saw something. Just not all, you saw many of them, but pick one or two of your favorites.
Well, one of my favorites for sure is I scored a film for HBO called Finishing Heaven, which turned out to get an Emmy nomination in 2010. It was a very, very interesting film about this a young film director named Robert Feinberg, who was a protege of Martin Scorsese's at NYU Film School, late 60s, early 70s, and Robert started making this really incredible film with his girlfriend, really kind of guerrilla style. He went totally off the rails. The thing just blew up, and that was that. About 8 or 9 years ago, Ruby, his girlfriend, who's a friend of mine, found out that the footage still existed. And the director of the film, Mark Mann, was helping Ruby sort of edit, the old stuff. And then he met them, and he just said, "These people are so wild. I should make a film about them."
I see.
So it's a documentary about, the creative process, about filmmaking, about that whole era. There happened to be a lot of Andy Warhol people in the film because they were all in that, Warhol circle. So
very interesting. Okay.
Yes.
So is that going to be in the studios? Is it in the theaters? Is it in the theaters, or is it
HBO owns it, and they broadcast it on one of their channels. I mean,
I see.
That's I think how people can get to see it. So
right.
they. It's part of their documentary
Well, they're watching
library.
us on cable now, most people. So
yeah, so
maybe they have an HBO account. That's where they can find
it. I would think, or just keep looking for it. I don't know if it's going to be distributed or how. I wish it was, but I don't know what.
And some other films. There was one I didn't really get to look at, but it seemed like a Western, some sort of shoot 'em up or.
Yeah, there's a guy named Lance Doty, who's a really great young director and an editor, has made a film called Shoot First and Pray You Live. It's like a spoof on spaghetti westerns. It's really dark. It's really twisted. It's very black humor spoof. And I did.
And you did the music for that.
Yeah, I did that, and I did another film called Crumble, which Stephen Bauer, who was in oh my God, the.
That's all right.
Al Pacino's great Scarface.
Oh, Scarface.
He was in Scarface. He was the young guy in Scarface. Al's sidekick and Oksana Lada from The Sopranos were the two principals. It was a very, very, very dark, twisted story about New York, love and relationships. And so I scored that, and it turned out, for me, it was a huge success. I won the Manhattan Film Festival Best Composer Award, and I won the Best Composer Award at the New York International Independent Film Festival.
What happens when you do the music for a movie and the music's better than the movie?
You just keep your mouth shut and smile.
At least you survived it, right?
Yeah, no, I'm good. It's been good for me. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. The problem with Crumble was it's only 28 minutes long, so they had it's kind of like what do we do?
You could fit it on this show. You could play it on.
Yeah, maybe we could. Absolutely.
One time that'd be great if we got permission.
Sure, it's really it's a great little film, and I was really proud of the music, and so I did that, and so I was always in this kind of this double world. Like I was interested in playing like rock music and hard rock music, but I was fascinated by composition and really like the science of musical composition. So I went to CUNY Queens, and I studied with George Pearl, the composer, who is arguably the world's great scholar of Alban Berg, who wrote Lulu and Wozzeck.
All right.
And George was an eminent Pulitzer Prize-winning composer himself, and he was my professor. I didn't even know who the man was, and because I was interested in taking composition classes, and boom, it was just so mind-opening. And then a few years later, I met Milton Babbitt, who was retired, but he looked at my work and he advised me to study with Jonathan Daw, who is currently a composition and theory professor at Juilliard, and so I did so. I spent 2 years studying with Jonathan. It was just, a revelation. And then at the same time, I was scoring these films, and now I'm doing a lot of stuff.
Tell us a little bit. What are you working on? What's the next thing?
Well, I'm writing an opera that's going to be on stage in Manhattan, and please come, everybody. It's going to be at the Medicine Show Theater on West 52nd Street on December 9th and 10th of this year. 2 months. It's deep in process right now. We're going to start rehearsing soon. And
what's it about?
Well, it's called The Plain of Jars.
It's in Laos during the Vietnam War, right? It's Vietnam War set.
It is. It's a really extraordinary, difficult story to tell. I'm telling it from 2 points of view. One, and it's a combination of that book and the eyewitness testimony of the victims, the refugees who were bombed, in the, where America was doing their secret bombing campaign to intimidate the North Vietnamese, and they were testing out like a whole new generation of weapons. It was a proving ground for the weapons, and with this indiscriminate, horrific, destruction of these people who didn't even know why they were being bombed. So I've mixed that with the story, The Legacy of Ashes, Timothy Weiner's book about the history of the CIA. So I'm telling it sort of from the point of view of the peasants, and there's the principal male characters are, John F. Kennedy, LBJ, Henry Kissinger, and Richard Nixon. It's pretty wild.
So it's an opera, so you're doing the libretto, you're doing the lyrics and all that.
Yeah, I'm writing the libretto right now.
And LBJ and JFK are singing?
Yeah, they're going to be on stage, and it's pretty.
You finally got them to sing.
Yeah, they're friends of mine. I talk to them regularly. And
Great. And so, that'll be December 9th and 10th, right? At the Medicine Show Theater on 52nd Street.
Yes.
West 52nd Street. Okay, good. Thank you for that. And so, Keith, wow, what do you, so I don't know, the last few minutes of the show, we promised we wouldn't talk about politics, but of course, after discussing that, how could I avoid asking you what you think of and if you have any plans to sing or write or do films about this incredible election year?
Who knows? Maybe at some point. I'm a big Hillary Clinton fan. I've met her. I think she's a very, very interesting, dignified, respectable person, and I've always admired her. My mother actually did some work with her. My mother was a professor at SUNY Buff State. My mom had a PhD and was a professor of criminology, and she worked in Washington, D.C. with Hillary Clinton for a few intervals. And we talked about her regularly, and I met her in New York, and Donald Trump is Donald Trump. I mean, he's a vile guy, and that last debate was was more surrealistic. It was more surreal than a Buñuel film, and it was just so vile what he did, bringing those 3 women out, and I think he's a misogynist, and he's just a very.
You would have thought that Hillary had the relation with the 3 women. I mean, it's just like, what does that have to do with her in a lot of ways?
It was just to use those people for political capital, for himself, to just try and denigrate her husband. I mean, it's just like,
advocating sexual assault. That's up there.
It
gets up there. I've never seen a president of the United States as sleazy as they are. Even Nixon on his worst day didn't do that, as far as I know.
Well, yeah, but I also watched the Trump tape with Billy Bush, and it's just it's more than locker room talk. It's just an attitude about
rape culture, they call it.
Well, that I think the most damning thing that he said is that when you're rich and famous, you can do anything you want, and there's no consequences. And I think that's the greatest evil truth of them all. So
maybe he's the right person to be running at this time. In a way, he's illustrated a lot about the political system that people have been talking about for a long time. Well, okay, I didn't want to drag you through too much of it, but it's hard to let that sit after what happened. I mean, to ignore it, it's like this giant elephant in every room right now.
Yeah,
of America, and here we're doing live radio, live television, the day after, so 2 days after. So enough of the painful part, but hopefully you'll bring some enlightenment to it through your writing and through your music, and that's the power you have through that. Do you see that as you seem to be politically motivated in a lot of the work you do? I mean, some of the
I'm
work
very
is
politically motivated.
Yeah, some of the work is business and work, but
yeah.
some of it is obviously what you believe and what you think.
I wrote a screenplay in 2005 about the Bush family. It was sort of like a spoof, like a Russ Meyer kind of spoof, and people loved it, but nobody would touch it. It was sort of like you know.
All right.
You
But
know,
now
I'll
maybe
see-
they will.
Well, yeah, who knows? And I'm
things
gonna
have changed.
I've like Saturday Night Live is, you know, the incredible like political satire. You know, I think that, you know, one of the best ways to really talk about the thing, you know, is use humor and satire. And it's, you know, the world is so crazy and upside down, but like, I don't think we're headed for, you know, destruction. It's just, you know, we really have to, you know, turn down the volume on a lot of this stuff and let people, you know, cooperate and communicate. We don't have to like blow everybody up to prove that we're right. I mean, it's just so. I think if, you know, we learned anything in Vietnam, that was it. You know, hopefully that was it. But, you know, it's still, some of this stuff is going on still, and you know, America's a very, very complex place with a lot of different people and a lot of different opinions and ideas about what's right and how we should do things. But, you know, I'm a very, very strong, you know, anti-gun person. You know, and you know, I think Hillary's stand about, you know, banning assault weapons is noble and needs to be done.
Well, we've had these terrible tragedies in the last years,
Horrible.
and going on for a long time. And
Horrible.
you know, Orlando was
Horrible.
You know, I don't think anybody in America can be anything but very depressed right now. And I teach students from many countries. I teach English, and it's palpable, the depression, because they came here with an ideal of America being, you know, a great country, and then they're confronted with this every day. It's very depressing.
Yeah, and the you know, and part of the problem is the availability of like these assault weapons.
Are you going to do anything on that? Any music on that?
You know,
that's gets a hairy area like Orlando or something like that.
It's so hairy. You know, I'm focused on, you know, getting the Playing of Jars finished and on stage. You know, what I do next, I'm not sure. You know, it's complicated too, because like, you know, I think so often artists make mistake by throwing themselves into the political foray and the political debate and being self-righteous about stuff. Like I said, I think some of the best stuff that happens is like, you know, comedic satire. You know, like Jimmy Kimmel and, you know, the Saturday Night Live crew has like historically.
Or like the Yippies before, like, you know, Abby and
like
Jerry had a way running a pig for president. It still makes us laugh years later. Yeah,
you just like,
right?
It's just a crack up, but they had this idea.
The policeman arresting the pigs at the press conference. This is hysterical. I mean, nobody could have planned that, right?
Yeah, and yet it sort of opens the debate and the dialogue, and I think ultimately it can heal some of the wounds, and you know, people realize, you know, we've got to like communicate better, and we've got to, you know, negotiate, and we have to compromise. We can't just this like.
Half a minute to go. Remind folks, where can they learn more about Keith Patchel?
Well, keithpatchel.com is my website. If you check out the American Museum of Natural History's website and look for Dr. Carter Emmart, you'll see stuff on the MarsBand. We're going to be performing in January at the 18th at the Ludlow House. We met the director of the Soho Entertainment, and he loves what we're doing. So lots of gigs. And
thank you very much.
Fantastic. Thank you.